In the 1980s, horror was dominated by slashers, with iconic killers like Michael Myers, Leatherface, Chucky, and many others. But there were two characters that stood above the rest: Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees. And finally, in 2003, after years of rumors and being teased all the way back in Jason Goes to Hell, these two juggernauts finally shared the big screen to duke it out. Because there could only be one king. But was this the movie fans actually wanted? Or was it a huge disappointment? What's up, guys? Welcome back to Mike's Movie Room, and in today's video we are looking at, is this movie a horror classic mashup, or is it a completely missed opportunity? So join me as we dive deep into Freddy vs. Jason. In 1980, the world was introduced to Friday the 13th, a small-budget horror film that admittedly was heavily inspired by Halloween, but it went on to become a massive hit, thanks in part to special makeup effects artist Tom Savini with his creative and brutally realistic kills, and of course, that iconic score. But it was really the ending that changed everything. A young Jason suddenly jumps out of the water, covered in mud, worms, and decay, dragging Alice into the lake. Even though it was later revealed to be a dream, Jason Voorhees would become the true star of the franchise. 1 year later, in 1981, Friday the 13th Part 2 was released. This gave us our first look at adult Jason. But this was before the character was fully realized. Here, Jason is portrayed as more of a backwoods hillbilly type figure, a survivor of his childhood drowning who witnessed his mother's death, now living off the land, hunting animals, and killing anyone who enters his territory. And instead of the iconic hockey mask, he wears a potato sack with one eye hole, which honestly looks a lot like the town that dreaded sundown. And once again, Paramount had a hit. Then, in 1983, Friday the 13th Part 3 was released in 3D during the 3D gimmick era. And this is where Jason was fully realized. The hockey mask, the machete, the look we all recognize today. This is the Jason that became a legend. In 1984, we got Friday the 13th, the final chapter. This is actually my personal favorite in the franchise. This was originally intended to be the last film, and they wanted Jason gone for good. So Tom Savini returned to design and kill the very character he helped create. And honestly, this is the definitive Friday the 13th movie. Jason is at his most brutal. Ted White brings a truly menacing presence, and this version of Jason feels like an unstoppable force of pure rage. It has some of the best kills and some of the best characters in the series, right up there with Part 6 and the remake. Go ahead and start hating in the comments. So at this point, Jason was dead, but at the exact same time, another horror icon was just getting started. Also released in 1984, we got A Nightmare on Elm Street, and this is where we were introduced to Freddy Krueger, played by Robert Englund. And Freddy was different. He wasn't silent, he wasn't just a killer. He talked, he joked, he psychologically tortured his victims, and fans absolutely loved it. The franchise exploded with sequels, but unfortunately, by 1991, the character had started to become more of a joke than a threat. Meanwhile, Jason made his return in 1986 with Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, another fan favorite. And this is really when the idea of Freddy vs. Jason started gaining traction. Originally, the two were actually supposed to face off in Friday the 13th Part 7, but the studios couldn't come to an agreement. So instead, we got The New Blood, or as many call it, Jason vs. Dollar Store Carrie. Eventually, both franchises started winding down, with Wes Craven's New Nightmare in 1994 being the final Nightmare on Elm Street film, and Jason X in 2001 being the final Jason film. But something huge actually happened in 1993. Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday, was released. And while fans didn't exactly love that movie, the ending changed everything. After Jason is dragged down to hell, his mask is left behind in the dirt. And suddenly, Freddy's glove bursts out from the ground and drags Jason's mask into hell with his iconic laugh. And just like that, the hype exploded. Fans were now waiting for the ultimate showdown that was promised. But for years, nothing happened. Multiple scripts were written, studios couldn't agree, development kept getting delayed. So then we got Jason X, which honestly felt like it might have been the final nail in the coffin for any crossover ever happening. But after years of development hell, Freddy vs. Jason would finally begin moving forward in the early 2000s. New Line Cinema had spent years trying to crack the story, with at least 17 different scripts being written. Many of these ideas were wildly different. Some even involved Freddy-worshipping cults attempting to resurrect Freddy. Other scripts completely ignored the established mythology, something that frustrated both fans and the studio. Eventually, in 2001, writers Damian Shannon and Mark Swift stepped in and pitched a new approach. Their idea was simple: respect the characters, respect the history, make it all count. They wanted to keep the mythology intact, instead of reinventing everything, and that approach is what finally convinced the studio to move forward. At one point, James Wan was actually being considered to direct the film, but he was already committed to directing Saw, and was busy with other projects, so he ultimately couldn't take on the film. Instead, New Line brought in Ronnie Yu to direct, who horror fans might recognize as the director of Bride of Chucky from 1998. And that choice alone already gave fans a sense of what tone this movie might take, a mix of horror, style, and a bit of over-the-top energy. But before production even began, there was already controversy. Longtime Jason actor Kane Hodder, who had played the character since Friday the 13th Part 7, wanted to return for Freddy vs. Jason, but New Line Cinema had a different version. They wanted Jason to be taller and more physically imposing, to create a sort of David versus Goliath dynamic between Freddy and Jason. So instead, they cast Ken Kersinger, who stands at 6'5", making him the tallest actor to ever play Jason, and fans were not happy about it. Kane Hodder had become the Jason for many fans, and replacing him, especially in such a massive crossover event, was seen as a huge disappointment. Interestingly, Hodder still ended up having a small connection to the film. During the asylum scene, a screen shows footage from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 from 1990, and that's actually Kane Hodder playing Leatherface in that clip. He worked as a stunt performer on that film. Betsy Palmer, who played Jason's mother and the killer in the original Friday the 13th, was asked to reprise her role as Mrs. Voorhees, but she turned it down, feeling the role was too small. Which honestly always confused me, because she reprised her role at the end of Part 2, and that was honestly the same amount of screen time she would have been in Freddy vs. Jason. As for Freddy, this film would mark Robert Englund's final official on-screen appearance as the character. Although he would continue to appear as Freddy at conventions and events, he would officially retire from the role in 2014 after one final appearance in full costume and makeup. And scratch that, because actually 2018 he came back one more time for some random show, The Goldbergs. Don't know what that is, but it's still cool to watch. The film takes place after the events of Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare in 1991, and Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday in 1993, but before Jason X in 2001. Even though Jason X was actually released first, due to how long Freddy vs. Jason spent in development. The opening also features flashbacks from previous films for people who might not know about the characters. Unfortunately, we only get flashbacks from the Nightmare on Elm Street films, and none from the Friday the 13th series, and that's because New Line Cinema owned the rights to Jason as a character, but not the footage from the earlier films, which remained with Paramount Pictures. Another interesting fact, C.J. Graham, who played Jason in Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, was given a chance to return, but he turned it down out of loyalty to Kane Hodder, feeling that the producers had treated Hodder unfairly by replacing him. So after years of delays, countless scripts, fan anticipation, and behind-the-scenes controversy, Freddy vs. Jason was finally ready to hit theaters. And honestly, the final plot we got might have been the best case scenario for a crossover like this. Because let's be real, this movie definitely leans more toward a Nightmare on Elm Street film in terms of structure and storytelling. But the way they handled Freddy, that was actually really smart. We find Freddy in hell, weakened, because no one remembers him anymore. And that's the key idea. Freddy is powered by fear. And without fear, he's nothing. So what happened? The town of Springwood essentially covered up Freddy's existence. They erased him. Kids who started having nightmares? They were locked away in a mental institution. They were given Hypnosil, a drug used to suppress dreams, which, if you remember, is the same drug Nancy Thompson used in Dream Warriors. So Freddy comes up with a plan. If he can't make people afraid himself, he'll find someone who can. And that's where Jason comes in. Freddy resurrects Jason and sends him to Springwood to start killing, to create fear, to make people remember, to bring Freddy back. And it works. The town starts panicking again. People start remembering Freddy. And just like that, Freddy begins to regain his powers. But there's one problem. Jason won't stop. He keeps killing. He doesn't care about Freddy's plan. He doesn't care about balance. Jason just does what Jason does. And that's what turns this from a setup into a full-blown collision. Because now Freddy has a problem. The very thing that brought him back is now in his way. And that leads us to what everyone came for. The fight. The third act finally delivers on years of hype. Freddy versus Jason. Dream world versus real world. Strategy versus brute force. Speed versus power. And this is where the movie shines. It's over the top, it's chaotic, it's ridiculous at times, but it fully commits to the concept. And for a crossover like this, that's exactly what fans wanted. Now let's talk about what Freddy vs. Jason actually got right, and where it completely divided fans. First off, Freddy Krueger. This is hands down the best Freddy has been since the Dream Warriors. They brought back a darker, more menacing Freddy while still keeping his personality intact. And the makeup, easily one of the best looks Freddy has had. It finally felt like Freddy again, not the cartoon version we got in the later sequels. And then there's Demon Freddy, which looks absolutely incredible. And I really wish we got more of that look in the film. And obviously, Robert Englund's performance. This is essentially his swan song as Freddy Krueger. And if this really is the last time we ever see him in the role, it's a perfect send-off. You can tell he's having an absolute blast, chewing up the scenery, fully embracing the character, and reminding everyone why we love Freddy in the first place. And like I said earlier, this is probably the best story we could have hoped for. It respects both characters, ties into their mythology, and actually gives a believable reason for them to clash. The other characters are honestly pretty solid. Not the most memorable ever, but definitely better than a lot of entries in both franchises. And then we have the kills. This is where the movie delivers. A lot of the effects are still practical, which makes a huge difference. Yes, there is some CGI, but it never takes over the entire movie. It still feels grounded in that classic slasher style. Visually, the movie also makes a really cool choice. Freddy has red tones. Jason has green and blue tones. It's subtle, but it helps separate their worlds and adds to the atmosphere. And then we have the fight. This is what everyone paid to see. And the movie actually delivers. It's big, it's brutal, it's chaotic, and it feels like a true clash of icons. We get two separate fights. We get one in Freddy's dream world, and then we get one in the real world where Freddy is brought out and has to fight Jason. Now we move on to what divided fans. And this is where things get a little more controversial. Some fans felt like the movie leaned too heavily toward Nightmare on Elm Street, and that Jason was more in the background. Personally, I didn't mind that, but it's definitely something people notice. The bigger issue, though, was Jason himself. First off, fans were already upset that Kane Hodder was replaced. And then, director Ronnie Yu made a very specific choice. He wanted a different version of Jason, more of a zombie Frankenstein type Jason. And that's what we got. And in my opinion, this is one of the worst versions of Jason we've ever seen. He feels slower, less intelligent, almost dumbed down compared to the previous versions. And even though this is the tallest Jason, it still doesn't have that intimidating presence that Kane Hodder brought to the role. And while it doesn't completely ruin the movie, it does bring it down for me whenever Jason is on screen. But the biggest issue, and this is something most fans agree on, they made Jason afraid of water. And that just doesn't make any sense. Jason has never been afraid of water. It's literally part of his identity. I understand what they were trying to do. They needed something for Freddy to exploit, but it just feels completely out of character. And for a lot of fans, that's one of the biggest missteps in the entire film. Freddy vs. Jason was released August 13th, 2003. The film made over $110 million worldwide off just a $30 million budget, a box office success. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds a score of 40% from critics, and honestly, that's not surprising. Critics felt the movie was too over the top, more focused on spectacle than story, and leaned heavily into fan service. But here's where things get interesting. Most fans had a completely different reaction. The audience score sits a little higher, around 50%, and over time, it's become something of a cult favorite. Because fans weren't going into this film expecting a deep, Oscar-worthy movie. They wanted one thing, Freddy versus Jason. And for the most part, the movie delivered exactly that. Fans loved seeing the two icons finally share the screen. The brutal, over-the-top fights, and the fact that the movie fully committed to the concept. But at the same time, fans were still split. Some loved it as a fun, chaotic crossover. Others felt it didn't fully live up to its massive potential. And that's really the story of Freddy vs. Jason, a movie that critics dismissed, but fans kept alive. So, after all the hype, all the delays, and years of fans waiting, was Freddy vs. Jason a horror classic? Or a missed opportunity? Honestly, it's a little bit of both. Because on one hand, this movie absolutely delivers on what it promised. And for a movie that was stuck in development hell for years, this is probably the best outcome we could have gotten. But on the other hand, it's hard not to see the missed potential with replacing Kane Hodder. The idea of Freddy vs. Jason is huge. This should have been the ultimate horror movie. And while the film is fun, it never quite reaches that legendary level it could have. Between the Frankenstein version of Jason, some questionable character decisions, and choices like making Jason afraid of water, you can feel where the movie falls just a little short. But here's the thing, even with all its flaws, this movie works. It's fun, it's rewatchable, and most importantly, it gives fans what they came for. And sometimes, that's enough. So I'm sorry for the repetition, guys. I feel like I've been saying the same shit over and over in this video, but this is the best we could have ever gotten from a Freddy vs. Jason movie. I mean, maybe there's better scripts out there, but how they figured out how to do the mashup, no matter what you have to say about the movie in general, the setup actually works. And I mean, let's be completely honest here. Look at the Friday the 13th catalog and look at the Nightmare on Elm Street catalog. At least for me, there's really only a few movies in these franchises that I consider really good and I actually want to watch for enjoyment unless I'm doing a full fucking marathon. Nightmare 1, Dream Warriors, and New Nightmare. Those are the three main Freddy Krueger movies I'm going to put on if I'm in a Nightmare on Elm Street mood. Now, Friday the 13th is a different story because, at least for me, even the shitty movies are still more watchable than the shitty movies on the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. I don't know why, but I can watch Jason X, I can watch New Beginning over Freddy's Dead. I'm not saying they're good movies, I'm not saying they're my favorites, I never really want to go back and watch them, I'm just saying if I had to choose between Freddy's Dead or one of the shittiest Friday the 13th movies, I'm going with Friday. And then there's the whole character of Jason, man. I'm not saying it has to just be Kane Hodder. It would have been pretty sick if it was because, I mean, he cemented himself as Jason. Kane Hodder isn't really my favorite Jason, but I understand why he's the majority of people's favorites. But, man, even if CJ Graham came back, I understand why he didn't. Or if they even got Derek Mears or somebody else other than Ken Kersinger. And I'm not trying to slam the dude. He's a cool guy and shit, but... And I'm pretty sure it was actually just the direction of Ronnie Yu. So actually, Ronnie Yu, damn it, man, what the fuck? Just not... Dude, I don't care for the lumbering Frankenstein Jason. You know, the only person I've ever really seen find Jason intimidating in Freddy vs. Jason is my girlfriend. And she has nothing to base it on because she doesn't even like the Friday the 13th movies. And honestly, I might cut this out or leave it in a longer version of this video on Patreon or some shit. But I know there's really not continuity with the Friday the 13th movies, but Jason's opening the wrong eye in the beginning of the movie. And then later on, both of his eyes are open, so I don't know what went on there. I guess they just said fuck it halfway through, nobody's gonna notice. I did. But even with all its flaws, I still consider it a horror classic and I watch it all the time. And if I'm doing a marathon of either franchise, I'm ending it with Freddy vs. Jason. Unless it's the Friday the 13th franchise, which I end it with the remake. So for me, I'm giving Freddy vs. Jason 3.5 out of 5 stars. And that's honestly a good rating. Anything above 2.5 for me is a good movie and rewatchable. Alrighty guys, so those are my thoughts and opinions on Freddy vs. Jason. Comment down below and let me know if you agree or if you disagree. I love chatting it up with you guys. I try and respond to every single one of you, but it's getting hard because the comment section is starting to blow up on these videos. I love the horror community and I love the passion, but some of y'all get a little feisty, man, for real, but I love it. It's all good fun. And like always, I appreciate everybody who's been supporting the channel. And if you're new here and like content like this and want to see more, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. And don't forget to follow me on TikTok and Instagram. I post some different shit on there that I don't post on YouTube. And I also have a Patreon. I have absolutely nothing on there yet. I'm going to start putting behind the scenes shit on there and probably some longer rant videos where I'm cussing my ass off. I get extremely passionate over certain movies. But eventually I'm going to have some stuff on there for people who care to go and look and see more. Alrighty guys, I've been talking enough. Until next time, Mike's Movie Room, I'm out of here. Peace.